Okay, we are live. So,
Yay.
welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today on your Friday midday, maybe on your lunch hour or just hanging out for the day. So, welcome. We're glad you're here. Just to let everyone know, we do have everyone muted during the presentation, and we will have time for questions at the end, and you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask questions if you have any. Or there is a chat window where you can type there. If you're shy and don't want to come on live with us, that's totally fine. You could also ask questions there as well. So let's jump into it. I am Tina Curry-Logan. I am one of your hosts, and my co-host is Dr. Hayley Nelson. Hello, Hayley.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining.
So we have quite a bit to cover today, so let's jump right in, looking at an overview of our presentation for today. We're talking all about stress. That's why you're here, right? So I won't go through all of these in detail, but just wanted you to see kind of the roadmap of where we're headed today. And we've got a lot of ground to cover, but before we get into all of that, Hayley and I wanted to introduce ourselves to you, a little bit of personal background for those of you who don't know each of us personally. So I will turn it over to Dr. Hayley Nelson to introduce herself to you.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Dr. Hayley Nelson. I have my PhD from Johns Hopkins University in psychological and brain sciences. I went there after earning a bachelor's degree in psychology from SUNY Geneseo. And then after finishing my PhD, my husband and I moved up to Philadelphia. You can see us there in the picture at Love Park in downtown Philly. And I was a faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania in their biological basis of behavior program, where I taught several classes there, as well as ran the undergraduate research program for students interested in the biological basis of behavior. After leaving Penn, I'm now over at Delaware County Community College, where I'm a full-time tenure-track assistant professor of psychology, where I'm teaching several classes there, advising students. I do a lot of community outreach, a lot of talks and presentations like this, and town hall meetings, things like that. And I love it. I'm so happy and blessed to be there. In addition, I also am the founder of Be Well with Dr. Hayley Nelson. It is a business that I started to really help support people who are looking to improve their health, both inside and outside. So whether it's through nutrition programs, exercise recommendations, skincare routines, just personal care, trying to eliminate stress, really focusing on both physical as well as mental health. And I am proud to have a brand partner with Arbonne International with my business. In addition, so a little personal about me, as you see, there's a picture there with my husband and myself in Philly. Our first child is my dog, Callie. She's up there in the corner. It's actually fitting because she's actually kind of the inspiration for why I wanted to do this talk. She was recently diagnosed with Cushing's disease, which as a result, ends up increasing the amount of cortisol that she has. And we're going to talk a lot about cortisol in today's lecture. So I had to include her on this little bio here. And then, of course, my human children, my pride and joy. You can see them here. This is Charlie. He is almost 5.5, and Henry will be 2 in June. And just love looking at their little mugs every day. And of course, any excuse to go to the beach, we will take. Here is me and my boys at the beach this past January in my parka. It was freezing, but hey, if I can see the ocean, I'm going to be there. So that's just a little bit about me. And now it's Tina's turn to take it away.
All right, thank you. Yes, I am Tina Curry-Logan. I am a personal development and leadership coach. I have a degree in civil engineering from Columbia University. With that, I went into the construction management world for the past 10 years. I worked for a commercial general contractor in quite a few different capacities. I did work out on site, and then I worked in more of the pre-construction kinds of capacities, the bidding and pricing exercises, working with designers and owners. So I have that business expertise that I bring to the table. I am also a certified yoga teacher. I bring a lot of yoga philosophy into everything I do. I'm really fascinated with all of those components, the meditation and mindset kind of techniques, which are things that we will talk about later here. I am also in the process of getting my ICF accredited coach certification through the IPEC program, and I will be finished with that this June. I'm very excited about that. So I'm bringing coaching skills to the table as well. And I've blended all of those things together in my business, which is called Self-Worthy. I do one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and webinar presentations, leadership development trainings, things like we're doing today. My real passion is helping people connect to their passion and purpose to become better leaders. That's what I'm all about. I love that. I love helping people take charge of their lives. On a personal note, I am originally from the Philly area, but I find myself here in Texas now. Country music is finally starting to wear off on me after 10 years, but I am a Philly girl at heart, and I am here with my wife, Liz. We have been married for 7 years now, together for 12 years. This is a picture of us from our honeymoon in Greece, and we don't have any human children yet. We're working on that, but I do have my cats, Gus and Olive here, who are my current pride and joy until things change there. But so that's me. Enough about us though. Let's jump right in here, right? Okay, let's talk about stress. Right off the bat, we all have it. If you tell me you don't have stress in your life, you're either not human, or I'm going to tell you, why are you here? You don't need us. I think we all can admit that we have some stress in our lives. The thing about stress is it's essential for our survival, but it's the long-term chronic stress that can take a toll on your mind and body. And Dr. Nelson is going to dive all into that here in a bit. But what we want to talk about first is identifying the stressors in our lives, because that sets the roadmap for how we can start to mitigate stress. So really identifying where those things are coming from. And to do that, we have a little activity for you called the Wheel of Life. This is something that I do with my coaching clients because it helps us get a picture of where they stand in that moment. So I uploaded this to the Facebook group. If you were able to get it and print it off, fantastic. If not, don't worry about it. I'm going to talk you through how to draw your own wheel here. So just grab a blank piece of paper if you have one handy, something to write with, and we'll draw one real quick, okay? So I'm going to bring up a bigger version of this so you can see what it looks like. And all you're really going to do is draw a big circle and split it into 8 sections. So it'll look something like this. This is my wheel that I drew real quick. Doesn't have to be pretty. It can just be, you know, enough that you can see the pie pieces here, okay? And once you have that, then we're going to label each section based on the areas of life that are on this wheel, and I'll read them off to you. It might be a little bit small on your screen. So the sections that we have are family and parenting, personal development, spiritual awareness, fun and enjoyment, relationships, which is split into intimate and social. You can combine them into one if you prefer. We have health and aging, personal finance, and career and profession. And I'll read those off to you again. We have family and parenting, personal development, spiritual awareness, fun and enjoyment, relationships, which are intimate and social, health and aging, personal finance, and career and profession. So we'll have the wheel set up with those categories, and you may be able to see that there's a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these sections. If you want to write out 1 through 10 from the middle of the wheel out towards the edge, then you can do that. Otherwise, don't worry about that. You can kind of just estimate when you're filling this out, okay? So don't stress. This isn't an exact science. This is just to get a bigger picture view of what's going on in your life. Okay, give you a couple more seconds if you're still working on that. Don't want to rush you. But again, just looks something like this. Doesn't need to be pretty. Clearly mine is not that pretty. So, okay. All right, so now we're going to dive into the actual Wheel of Life exercise, which I love doing. A lot of times people have aha moments that they didn't expect to have doing this exercise, even though it looks very straightforward. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do is take a look at each of these categories, and thinking about each one individually, I want you to think on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that area of life to you? 1 being not at all, 10 being extremely important, of the utmost importance in my life. So when you decide what that is, make a circle, either circle the number or make a little circle on your hand-drawn wheel to show kind of where that is in a 1 to 10 scale. So it could look something like this. Yours could be completely different, but having those circles to indicate level of importance in your life. And once you've done that, I want you to connect them all with lines. So you can see on this example wheel, it doesn't look very round, does it? There's some points and some dips. This goes to show that our lives aren't all balanced, and it's not all well-rounded necessarily, because we hold different things more important than others. What do these results say about you? When you look at your wheel, the thing that you can gain from this part of the exercise is, okay, the things that I value are the things that I'm going to say are important. So things that are values of mine. So on this wheel, you can see there's the 9 is circled for family and parenting. So family would be a value for this person. Career and profession is listed as a 7, which is pretty important. And you can extrapolate from some of these. It's not always just the exact wording of what's here. So career and profession, if that's ranked pretty highly on importance level, that could mean you have achievement as a value. So this is helping us to identify the things that are important to us and what that really means. So we go beyond what's written here and take a look at what can we infer about ourselves based on the way we've responded. Okay, here's where it gets fun. We're going to do another part of this. So on the same wheel, looking at the same categories, now on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to indicate how satisfied you are in each area of life. And this time mark with a square so you can tell the difference, okay? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not satisfied at all, and 10 being completely satisfied, how satisfied are you in each of these areas of life? So it could look different. Might not exactly match up. So we'll connect those with a line as well. And now looking at this example wheel, you can see the shape is quite different. Things don't exactly line up. And the question that I would ask now is, how do you interpret the gaps in these areas where you can see career and profession is listed as a 7 for importance, but a 4 for satisfaction? What does that say, right? That shows that it's something that you value, but maybe you're not living in alignment with that value. You're not living up to that. You're not treating it with the importance that you say that it has in your life. Okay, so let's do a little debrief on this. What we're looking at in this activity is that rating the importance of these components of your life is a way to help you start identifying your values, the things that are really important to you. And then when we rank satisfaction level and we see significant gaps, and I'm saying a significant gap would be a 2 to 3 point difference, is a significant difference. When we're doing that, when we see those gaps, that can help us identify areas where we are not living in alignment with those values. And that can be a source of stress. So the other thing to pay attention to here is I had you look at each of these individually, and life doesn't work that way. We don't live in these neat little pie pieces. Everything is connected. There's interplay between these different components. And so to give you an example of how that works, I worked with a client recently who she came to me to work on her career development. She wanted to get a promotion. We filled out the wheel of life together, and she ranked her career and her personal finance relatively low as a 3 and 4, so pretty low. Her family, however, she rated as a 10. She's a single woman, but she is very close to her parents. She sees them almost every day. She's close to her sister, and she has a nephew that a lot of times she helps take care of. So she feels very, very strongly about her family and sees them as very important. So when I looked at the results of the wheel with her, it was clear to me that, yes, she wants to work on her career development. But when I asked her what she interpreted from the wheel as a whole, looking at everything in a connected way, what she saw was maybe she was over prioritizing her family time at the expense of her career development. Maybe she needed to put up a little bit more of a boundary and say no to some of the things that were expected of her, you know, watching her nephew or things like that. Instead of dropping everything to do that, she saw maybe I need to be a little bit more clear and say, no, I need to work on my own career right now. So those are the kinds of things that can come out of this exercise that aren't necessarily looking at it for someone else. It may not make a lot of sense, but when you look at your own, you can gather some other information that you can infer off of the page. So this is a great activity. Everybody is going to have a unique result here because everyone's different. And the other thing to note is that the results that you have today might not be the same as what you have in 6 months or a year from now. The cool thing about this is you can use it as almost a benchmark in time to say, this is where I am right now, and this is where I am 6 months later, to say, this is how I've developed in that amount of time. So this is a really cool exercise. It helps us start to identify some of the areas where we could have some stress, why we're feeling stress. But I'm not the PhD here, so I'm going to now hand it over to Dr. Hayley Nelson to be able to talk to you a bit more about the science behind the stress response.
Thank you so much, Tina. Let me share my screen now. Hopefully you can see this. There we go. So yeah, so now once you've identified, and these are, you know, again, just some examples from the Wheel of Life, you know, with those 8 different categories, and maybe there's other categories that you would like to really delve into deeper, and I'm sure Tina can work with you individually on that as well. But once you identify these potential areas in your life that are causing stress, what is stress? What is it doing to your body? What is it doing to your brain? And what are some of the problems that could be resulting from it? So that's where I'm going to step in and kind of really talk more about the physiology of the stress response. And how I'm going to do this, I mean, I'm a brain geek, so I have to talk about the nervous system, what it is. I'm going to give you a very Cliff's Notes version of it, just to give you some of the language and terminology that we're going to be talking about, and then delve into the neurobiology of the stress response. And then once we talk about some of the problems that can happen with stress and anxiety, we can talk about different holistic options to be able to manage stress and anxiety that you might be experiencing in your life. So the nervous system, what is it? How does it affect how we think and how we act, right? The nervous system, mainly talking about your brain and spinal cord, right, and also all the peripheral nerves throughout the rest of your body, the whole function of it really is to be able to allow you to interact with the outside world. So you are able to receive all this sensory information from everything around you, and you're able to do that through your senses, right? So through your sight, your sound, your touch, things like that. And then it gets brought into your brain, and your brain is able to process this information, to be able to pay attention to it, to be able to store it in memory, use it at a later time. And then as a result, that affects your behavior. Right? So let's say there's a bee flying around and it lands on my arm. Now I'm able to see it, I'm hearing it, I can feel it on my skin, right? And then I process this information. My brain is interpreting it. And then I have to pull up from my memory a horrible situation when I had a bee actually fly up my nose. Mom, you probably remember that. And it traumatized me, right? And so here I am, I'm remembering this memory, and my brain is doing all of this activation, and I'm paying attention to all the stimuli around me. And then I have to have some kind of behavioral response. Now I'm going to run away like a little girl. I'm going to bat it away. But other people, they might look at it and say, oh my gosh, I want to save this and look at it under a microscope, or I want to see if I can put it back in its hive, or, you know, other people might try to smush it with a shoe, whatever, right? But your brain is able to interpret all this information, make a decision on how you're going to act, and then actually carry out that action, right? And how it's able to do this is because our nervous system is set up, and it is compiled of specialized cells known as neurons, and they function through electricity. So it's electrical activity, all from the ions that we consume on a daily basis, salts and sugars and things like that, they're able to function through this electrical activity. Now, how it works, how these neurons work, they work the same way as the whole nervous system in general. They receive information from nearby cells through the dendrites, right? So it's the area of the neuron. And then if there's enough information that's gathered together, these cells are actually doing math computations, right? And if there's enough information that gets added up together, the neuron does what it's called as firing. And specifically what it's doing is it's firing an action potential. And this action potential is an energy signal that's being sent down along the axon, where it sends that message on to other nearby cells. Now, this information that is shared between these neurons is actually chemicals, right? At least in the human nervous system. Primarily, we're going to be talking today about the neurotransmission, right? Which is a chemical signal that's released from one neuron to another. And as you can see here on this, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this axon is sending the signal down, and then it releases all these little red dots, which are chemicals, into this synapse, which is the space between two cells, and they're received by another cell, and then that cell receives this information and then either is going to generate another signal or it's going to be inhibited, right? So it's an infinite number of possibilities that we can do. Now, I just want to give you a frame of reference. We have, as humans, just in our brain alone, we have around 100 billion neurons, right? So wrap your head around that. There's 100 billion neurons, and each one of those has about 10,000 connections to nearby cells and other connections. So basically, it's an infinite number of possibilities, right? So that's how identical twins, they might have exactly the same genetics, but they respond differently. They have different memories, all of that because their brains are different, even though genetically they might be the same. And what also adds to this flexibility and being able to have different responses is the fact that by using chemical signals, we can have a variety of different chemicals that can be shared between these neurons. Specifically, those chemicals that we're talking about, they're called neurotransmitters because they transmit information from one neuron to another. And to date, we have over 100 different neurotransmitters that have been identified, and that number is continuing to rise as more research is being conducted. But I just put on this slide just some of the top, I don't even know how many are on here, 6 or 7, that are that a lot of researchers really talk about. The one that we're going to spend most of our time talking about today in this presentation is serotonin. You've probably heard of serotonin before. And the reason why is because it's really intricately involved in our mood, right? How we feel on a day-to-day basis, our anxiety levels, depression levels. It's also involved in our sleep and wake cycles. It's involved in so many different functions. But for today's lecture, we're really going to be talking about our mood and anxiety. And what you can see on this chart is looking at some of these neurotransmitters, what can happen if they're out of balance, right? So if you have too little serotonin, for example, that can be linked to depression. Or if you have too much dopamine, this can be linked to schizophrenia. And too much glutamate can be linked to seizures. So there's so many different things that can happen if the neurotransmitter systems and the amount of neurotransmitters are not in balance, right? So it's a very delicate system. It's set up in such a way that it's, to perform optimally. But when we have these stressors in our life, for example, or other things that happen to our life, these neurotransmitter systems can get out of balance. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about how that happens. And then we're going to delve into what we can do to help mitigate that and get our system functioning at an optimal level. So we talked about the neurotransmitters and the nervous system. Another system that you really should focus on and should understand is our endocrine system, which is really just a fancy term for our hormones, right? So how our hormones are dictated and spread throughout our body. It's really a beautiful interplay between our brain and the rest of our body. How this happens is our brain sends a signal to a gland. It's called the pituitary gland. It's also found in our brain. And this is going to regulate the release of hormones throughout our body. And it does that by sending signals to other glands throughout our body, like our thyroid gland or our adrenal gland, that then they release these chemicals into our bloodstream that goes throughout general circulation. Now, for today's lecture, we're going to primarily be talking about the adrenal gland that is going to release the hormone cortisol, which is our stress hormone. Everyone, you might have heard of it that way, as the stress hormone. And then there's this beautiful feedback with the cortisol that, then the brain is able to understand how much cortisol is being released, and it can slow the system down, or it can ramp it up during different times of stress when we need it. But sometimes that system can get out of balance, and we might have an overproduction or just too much stress in our life where we're constantly secreting a lot of cortisol, which can have a lot of negative effects on us. So why cortisol would get released in the first place is because of stress. It's part of our stress response. So what is stress, right? When you think about stress, this is actually a very active process. It's a process of how we view different life events and things that are occurring to us. And we call it stress appraisal, because we can take these situations and these events that are happening around us, and we can view them as either threatening or challenging. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. And then that is going to dictate how we respond to it, right? So just like the nervous system is set up to receive information, process it, and then respond, that's what the stress response is, really. So you're taking in all these outside stimuli, you're thinking about it, you're processing it, and then you're responding in some way. Now, stressors are the things that are happening in our environment, the stimuli that are happening, that we are then interpreting as either a challenge or a threat. And as we're going to see, if we respond and we view these stressors as threats, that's what's going to have these really strong negative reactions, especially if we have a very extreme stressor, or if we have a prolonged period of time where we're encountering and dealing with a lot of stress. This is where we can have significant harm to our bodies and our brains. So I want you to take a minute here to kind of evaluate where you stand on this, amount of stress that you might have in your life, right? So you might have a friend who recently lost a spouse, or is serving a jail term or something like that. These are really impactful times in your life, right? Where you can have, sorry, I'm just watching people take a picture of me. It's funny. It's fine. When you have these big life-changing events, right, you have researchers came up with this idea of being able to kind of rank them, giving them a life change unit or an impact score. So there's certain things that are in your life that are, obviously very traumatic, or, causing a lot of stress in your life. But then there's also a lot of everyday little minute things that you might think of being minute, like getting parking tickets, right? They're kind of an annoyance or a nuisance. But if you get enough of those over time, that can actually equal how much stressors you might be having, the impact of some of these other larger things. So what I would like you to do, and I can share this file with you so you can take it home and sit down in the privacy to be able to really kind of figure out where you stand. But what I want you to do is think about the last 12 months. So in the last year, how many of these things you've encountered? And then get out your calculator and add them up. Now, if you've had, 3 times where you had, troubles with your boss, and you had that 3 times, for example, then you have to multiply 23 times 3. And you add that all up within the past 12 months, and then combining them all, and then you're going to get a life change unit score. And what you can see here is if you add them all up and you have anywhere from 150 or up, that means there's going to be a significant chance that you're going to have a significant illness in the near future. So if you range between 150 and 199, it's about a 50% likelihood, versus 300 or more, it's about an 80% likelihood that at some point in the near future, you're going to have a significant illness that you're going to be dealing with. Now, every time I've given this to people, I've never met anybody who is under 150. So if you're at 150 or more, don't worry. You are not in the minority. You're actually in the majority. Most people do have troubles and things that are happening in their life that are causing a negative impact on their health, right? So now the rest of the presentation is going to be talking about what those negative factors might be and how we can correct them, how we can fix them. So what happens when we have stress and stressors in our life, there's 2 systems in our body that are going to be activated. We have our sympathetic nervous system. This is our fight or flight response, right? And what that's going to do is prepare our body for an emergency response to be able to get out of a dangerous situation or attack somebody who's charging at us, something like that. It's going to be that emergency response. That's automatic. We don't have any control over that. That's just going to happen. The other thing that's going to happen, that's going to get activated in times of stress, is our HPA axis. And this stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And I know it's a mouthful, so you can just call it the HPA axis. And what this is this is the interplay between your nervous system and our endocrine system, where we're going to release that cortisol into our bloodstream during times of stress. So first, let's look at that autonomic arousal, the sympathetic nervous system. So imagine, you're one of these people that are pictured here, that you see a child running towards a body of water and you know that they can't swim. Imagine the emotions that you're going to be feeling. You're going to start feeling really nervous, right? Your heart is going to start pumping really fast. You're going to start breathing. You're going to run and charge towards that child to try to save them, right? And this is automatic. This is our sympathetic nervous system immobilizing us to be able to get more oxygen to our muscles, to be able to perform the best, to be able to save that child or save ourselves in that time of stress. So this is essential for our survival, to be able to activate this sympathetic system. And then we grab the child, we save them, and what are we all going to do? We're going to take that deep breath. We saved the child, right? We averted danger. And now all of a sudden our parasympathetic nervous system is going to automatically kick in. It's going to slow down our respiration. We're going to stop sweating. Our heart rate is going to slow down, right? And this is all automatic, and it's essential for our survival, right? We want to try to maximize the amount of time that we're in this parasympathetic division, in this calm, relaxed state. But sometimes in the times of a lot of stress or prolonged extreme stress, we might be overactivating the sympathetic system on a day-to-day basis. And this can have some real significant negative effects on our health. To touch base on the HPA axis, this is going to become activated. Well, it's going to be activated during any stress response, but it's the dominant response when we encounter prolonged stressors. So what this is going to do, it's going to activate the system to release and secrete ACTH, which in turn stimulates the adrenal gland to secrete cortisol, that stress hormone, and it gets distributed throughout our whole body. And what cortisol does, the purpose of it, is to mobilize energy to be able to protect us and allow us to survive in really difficult situations, right? So we need cortisol, but what can happen is during prolonged stress and a buildup of cortisol, that's when we're gonna have negative problems as a result of having too much stress. So one of those negative things that can happen is it can weaken our immune system. So by activating this stress response, it's going to initially activate the immune system. And sometimes this can lead to autoimmune disorders, right? It can trigger prostaglandins to try to combat that, leads to inflammation throughout our body. And then with prolonged stress response, it actually can produce symptoms similar to depression. Again, it's going to weaken the immune system if it's initially activating it, and then over time, it's going to end up weakening the immune system. So that's why you can see people, I'm a professor, so at the end, finals week, everybody's sneezing and coughing, and they're sick, and pink eye, and all of these things are happening during finals because it's a stressful time for all of my students, right? And I understand that. I tell them to stay away. But, we can see their immune systems are weakened because they're stressed out. Another thing that can happen is it can directly target the brain and harm the hippocampus. Now, if you're not familiar with the term hippocampus, this is the area of your brain that it's involved in so many different things, so I'm not trying to oversimplify it. But one of the main things that the hippocampus is involved in is learning and memory. So by having this too much stress in your life, it can actually weaken your ability to learn and remember things, and can have a negative impact because it can actually kill some of the neurons and shrink the size of your hippocampus in prolonged stress. And so I don't know about you, but let's say I have a really stressful time in my life and my new best friends become Ben and Jerry's, right? I start engaging in unhealthy behaviors, right? Some people might lead to smoking or drinking, poor nutrition, poor sleep habits. This is all very common. And all of these things, oh, did I just lose my screen? Sorry, on my screen, it just went away. Come back. Sorry, here we go. Okay, sorry about that. Those negative behaviors, right, can lead to more negative health consequences just by being bad things to do. And this happens in response to persistent stressors or negative emotions that you might be encountering. And that in turn also is going to release more stress hormones, which we talked about, activating the sympathetic nervous system, which can lead to headaches, high blood pressure, a lot of different issues that way. And it also suppress the immune system. And all of these things can compound and lead to increased rates of heart disease, which is a huge problem, not only in our country, but around the world. So it's definitely something that we really want to focus on and identify these potential stressors in our life to try to manage them so that these problems don't continue to happen and lead to long-term permanent damage. But I want to talk about some ways that we can manage stress. The first one I want to talk about is stress appraisal. I mentioned it earlier, but what stress appraisal really is we have these stressors in our life, and then we have a choice of how we're going to think about them, how we're going to process it. So let's say the stressor is you have a really tough job that your boss has assigned to you. So you have a task, and it's a tough job that you have to handle. One way that you can look at this is saying, okay, I'm going to apply everything that I know. I'm going to work really hard on this. I know I might be staying up late to work on it, but I'm going to assemble a really great team behind me to get everything done. And I'm going to handle this, and it's going to be challenging, but we can do it, right? Or you can look at the exact same stressor, but look at it as a threat. And you're going to say, oh, this is beyond me. I give up. I can't do this. I'm dumb. I can't handle this. It's too much pressure for me. And you give up, right? So the exact same stressor, but the only change there is how you think about it, how you're processing it, how you're thinking, right? And so you can look at it as a challenge. And if you do that, you're going to be really aroused. You're going to be focused, motivated, and driven to do the best that you can do. Versus if you're looking at it as a threat, and then that's when anxiety is going to kick in. You're going to be fearful, and you're not going to perform very well. So really, the very first step in this stress response is in your control. All of these events in our life flow through the psychological filter, right? And how we appraise an event is going to influence how much stress we have, and then also how we respond to those stressors. Another thing to think about, and this is especially in our culture, and physicians are very readily able to do this, and they do it probably a little too much, but they will prescribe medications to help people manage their stress and anxiety. Two of the more common ones for anxiety would be SSRIs, which stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Fancy, name for drugs like Prozac or Celexa, Lexapro, Zoloft. There's so many of them. They all really do the same thing, which is to increase the amount of serotonin. Okay. Another option, another medication that people give are benzodiazepines. These are great for anxiety relief. They're anxiolytics. They work really well to help lessen and slow down your immune system. But with medications, while they can be quite effective for some people, they're not the best choice for most people, right? They're overprescribed in many cases. It can lead to dependency and a lot of other side effects that you don't want to have. So while medications can be beneficial, they're not the best option for many people. So let's look at some more holistic approaches, right? The first one I want to talk about is social support. And Tina's going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. But just having a group of people around you to be able to talk your problems through, AA meetings if you're struggling with substance use disorder, things like that. Just having friends to be able to bounce ideas off is so important. Also, breathing routines and meditation. Again, Tina's going to talk about this in just a second as well. Research shows that this is very beneficial to really kind of activate that parasympathetic nervous system and slow everything down. Aerobic exercise. This, and I'm going to show a slide here for aerobic exercise, how it can be so beneficial. So what this is looking at was several women who had depression, and they gave them 3 different treatment options. So either they received no treatment, and you can see that their depression scores did not change during this 10-week time period of that this this program went on, versus a relaxation treatment group, which you can see significantly reduced their depression scores over a 10-week period. But I really want to call your attention to this aerobic exercise group. So these individuals practiced aerobic exercise during this 10-week time period. And I mean, basically what it did, it counteracted the depression, basically doing naturally what the prescription medications do chemically by activating your giving you some arousal and activating your nervous system in such a way that you're going to release more of these neurotransmitters like serotonin in a natural way. And this is a significant finding, and it's been replicated time after time. And so aerobic exercise, things like going for a nice walk, a jog, swimming, things like anything that's going to increase your heart rate would be considered aerobic exercise. Okay, so that's something that is fantastic for many people to incorporate into their life. But again, this might not be what everybody is really looking for and able to do, especially if you have heart problems. This might not be the best option for you, or maybe you just don't have the interest in it. So other ways that you can help boost and manage some of the effects of stress would be monitoring what you're eating and what you're putting into your body. So through diet and nutrition. Specifically, I want you to focus on whatever you're putting into your body and what you're absorbing is going to allow your nervous system to function the way that it's supposed to. You need to have a proper balance of salts and sugars and water for your nervous system to function the way that it's supposed to. And all of those neurotransmitters that I mentioned before, at least the ones that I had listed before, they're all synthesized by amino acids that we get from proteins in our diet. So you need to make sure that you're eating a well-balanced nutrition plan to be able to produce these neurotransmitters like serotonin, right? So if you look here, serotonin, the precursor to serotonin is tryptophan. You can find it naturally in things like beets and spinach, eggs. They're loaded with a lot of these precursors to be able to naturally create these neurotransmitters. I love working with clients and helping them identify certain foods to increase and include in their diet, and also eliminate other foods and additives that might be causing harm for them. I do this through this like 30-day boot camp program where you eliminate potential triggers and allergens from your life, and then you slowly start reintroducing that things like gluten back into your life, and you can see how your body responds to it. And at the same time, while you're practicing this elimination and then reintroduction, we're also encouraging people to eat things like more leafy green vegetables to be able to give you these precursors and other vitamins and nutrients that you might be lacking so that you can see how your body's supposed to feel. Another thing with nutrition, so some people, they're not ready to change how they eat. They don't want to, they're not interested, right? I get that all the time when I talk to people, but they still have stress in their life and they're still saying, well, what can I do to help myself? I'm not gonna exercise and I'm not gonna change how I eat. Is there something I can just take to make myself better, right? And I would say, yes, there is actually. So let me just walk you through what this is, and then I can tell you what that magic thing is that we can do. So we have stress in our life, right? And what that is going to do is alter our serotonin. 5-HT is just a fancy way of saying serotonin, okay? So stress itself is going to alter how our serotonin is working. And as a result, we also talked about this, that stress is going to activate our stress response. And that's going to increase the amount of cortisol that's released throughout our body and into our bloodstream. Now, this cortisol, we talked about the benefits of it, but some of the negative things would be to increase inflammation throughout our body. You do not want to have inflammation in your body. It causes a whole host of problems, okay? But cortisol, what it's going to do is it's going to increase inflammation and as a result, suppress our immune system, right? And the final thing that I want to add is it not only is all of this inflammation, immune suppression bad for you, it also reduces the amount of serotonin that's available by decreasing the amount of tryptophan that you have in your brain to be able to create and release serotonin. So this obviously is a bad thing, right? We don't want that. But what new research is finding is that by actually taking care of our gut health, by incorporating healthy bacteria, such as probiotics, into our system and into our gut, what that does is, as you can see, it interacts with this system by stopping the inflammatory response, okay? So yes, you're still gonna have the cortisol, stress is still coming in, right? But what you can do is you can help lessen the effects of that inflammation and reduction of tryptophan by simply incorporating really good probiotics into your day-to-day life. Now, before you go off to Walgreens or Amazon and start buying all these probiotics, not all probiotics are as beneficial for this specific thing. So there are certain strains that are better than others. I love the strain Bacillus coagulans. You can buy it in a lot of different formulations. The formulation I use is with my company with Arbonne because it includes a lot of other digestive enzymes and prebiotics to help it grow and get absorbed into your gut and also colonize in your gut. And another thing to keep in mind, not all probiotics can actually withstand the high acidity in our stomach. So you want to try to find a strain that can do that and to colonize. And I'm happy to help you walk through that process and find products that would be beneficial for you to just incorporate into your day-to-day life. All right, so we talked about diet and nutrition. The last thing I have to mention is that you'd want to try to reduce toxins that are in your life. So things like smoking, right? Excessive drinking of alcohol. Little wine every once in a while actually can be beneficial for you, right? But a couple bottles of wine every once in a while might not be the best option to help reduce stress. But another thing, a lot of people don't realize how many toxins we're actually introducing into our bodies through our personal care products. So things like parabens and phthalates, you're not going to see the term phthalate on the label, but you'll see terms like fragrance or artificial flavors and colors and fragrances. You really want to try to avoid those things. Sodium lauryl sulfate, toluene, anything that's based out of petroleum or mineral oils, you want to really try to avoid those. And they are running rampant in most products in our country because our government does not regulate them. So those are things that you really want to start looking out for. And again, I can help you find products that work for you and on your budget. So please feel free to reach out to me. I love working with people to really try to improve their health inside and out. So that being said, so these are some of my pro tips on how to manage stress, but I want to kick it back over to Tina to take it from here and talk about other holistic measures.
All right, let me grab the screen back here. Okay, so let's talk about holistic stress relief. Dr. Nelson touched on some of these, but what we're talking about here for holistic stress relief is mindfulness and awareness, stress appraisal and reframing, healthy habits, and connection. So we just heard a bit about healthy habits. We learned about the stress appraisal. So I'm going to touch on mindfulness and connection here. Let's talk about mindfulness first. The key is having that awareness of what your stressors are, where they're coming from. That's why we did the Wheel of Life exercise at the beginning of this presentation. That helps you get a picture of where that stress is coming from so that you can be more mindful of it and be more mindful of how you're reacting to it. Doing the things like going to Ben and Jerry's versus, treating yourself well, taking care of yourself. And there are actually ways that you can increase your mindfulness as a practice. Yoga and meditation are big ones. Meditation has actually been shown to, if you do it regularly, it could be a 5-minute meditation each day, can actually change the way that you react to everything in your life. You get stuck in traffic and you're more likely to just be with it and be mindful of how you're reacting and not have quite as significant of a response to it. And yoga as a practice is a physical practice, but there's also just that philosophy side of it that really helps, centering techniques and things like that, body and breath awareness. So I actually, for people who are not really interested in meditation or yoga, there are lots of other ways that you can meditate in your life. If you're a runner, if you like to get on the elliptical at the gym, even if you just like to be outside and sit and listen to the birds and the wind through the trees, those are all things you can do that are really meditation type techniques of being present and allowing yourself to just be aware of your thoughts, be aware of your body, and those things can really help you out. Another thing I like to do for increasing mindfulness is journaling. I journal every morning as a way, I call it my brain dump. I get all the thoughts out of my head. We as women especially can have all kinds of thoughts running through our mind all at the same time, and it's a good way to get it all out and be aware of it and recognize that some of those things may have been going on in our head and we don't realize it until we start writing. I've had plenty of times where I start writing something down and I realize I hadn't even fully formed that thought yet consciously. So, it's another way to just bring that awareness, recognize the things that are causing stress in our lives, and then being able to move through our day-to-day mindfully. The other thing I wanted to touch on is connection. This is really important, and this can mean a lot of different things. This can mean making new social connections, getting out and networking, meeting new people, getting to know them. This is also strengthening personal relationships. So it could be your close friends, your family, your significant other, really strengthening that bond can also give you a lot of stress relief. Laughter and fun. I love this one. Americans especially, we undervalue fun and enjoyment in our lives, but laughter and having fun can actually create some of those endorphins that help to mitigate stress. So that one is a big one. And I really encourage all of my coaching clients to address that as well and do things for themselves that maybe feel silly in the moment, but they can have a long-standing effect as well. And in connection, I like to always add in connecting with nature, getting outside. Those are things that can really help to amplify the effects of doing some of these other things. And so talking about that, we can talk about maximum strength stress relief, which when we take some of these things and combine them together, we can really maximize the stress relief that we receive from those activities. Let me give you a couple of examples. First would be going for a hike with a friend. What does that include? That includes exercise, getting out in nature, and social connection. So in one activity, you're able to tick 3 boxes and really amplify the effects of that activity on relieving your stress. Another example I want to share is a personal one: dance lessons with your spouse or partner. My wife and I recently signed up for dance lessons. The reason why we needed to sign up for dance lessons is a story for another day, but we recently got into doing these lessons, and I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it and how much I felt it really decreased my stress levels. Here's what I got out of it. Exercise. I was surprised that we are moving a lot more than I expected. I do break a sweat sometimes. We are strengthening our relationship. This is something where we have to work together as a team. And in doing so, we're actually forming a stronger bond with each other. We are having a lot of fun. We laugh so much because we can be silly in general, but doing things like this allows us to just have fun with each other. And a bonus one for me, when I talked about the wheel of life, I said you can extrapolate some values of yours based on those areas. One of my high values is love of learning. So I'm learning something new. And for me, that really gets me in the zone. That gets me focused. It gets me onto that, on the stress appraisal side of seeing it as a challenge. And it really helps me to manage my stress level and maximize the benefits that I'm getting from it. So in one activity, I'm doing 4 different things that are helping to relieve my stress response. So we can really take a look at these things as holistic and allow ourselves to bring in as much benefit as possible from each activity that we do and look at it in a way of how it's going to benefit us in relieving our stress. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. We'd like to open it for questions. If you have any, feel free to hop on and ask questions here, or please stay in touch with us if you're not able to stay on for a question and answer here.
But thank you all so much for coming and participating with us.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and hopefully you learned something and had some good takeaways. We'd love to hear feedback from you, what you learned, and yeah. So please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is here. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. There's a chat icon, and you can type it in. But if you don't have any other questions, we're not going to keep you on here. But actually, last night, I really liked a question that somebody posed last night. They asked each of us how we got into this idea of health and wellness. Like, what was it in our lives that kind of started us on this journey? And I don't know if you want to share your background, and I can share a little on me as well, because I thought it was a really good question and something we didn't touch on in our presentation.
Yeah, and the funny part was Hayley and I were kind of opposite in how we got to where we are. I started out doing a lot of different activities. I got really into yoga as a physical practice, and then I started to learn about the philosophy behind it, a lot of the meditation and mindfulness techniques. And I was really fascinated. I mentioned that I have a love of learning. So I tend to get really curious when I am interested in something and I just want to dig into it. And so I allowed that to unfold and just start to peel back the layers and see what else is there. And so that really drove me to coaching as well, because there's a lot of things in coaching techniques that are really in alignment with yoga. And so in a holistic way, I was able to touch a lot of things with a similar sort of vein. So for me, it had a lot to do with me being really curious and interested in understanding more about how we work as humans and how we can address the different things in our lives in a holistic way. So for me, it had a lot to do with curiosity. And Hayley, I'll let you talk about your journey.
Yeah, so last night Tina was saying how she's always just been healthy. It's just been something that's always been important for her. And then here I am. I said, I haven't always been healthy. This is actually something that I recently started discovering for myself. And it started with my own just personal health journey. I just wanted to get healthier, not only for myself, but also for my family. My oldest son, Charlie, I was breastfeeding him, and he was having all of these negative health problems. He had like bloody diapers and all this eczema, and we had all these allergies. And so I really had to start being careful about what I was eating, because whatever I was eating and putting on my body was getting into his body as well. So I really had to, just for my own, personal health journey, I had to start reading labels and understanding what all these toxins are that I had no idea about. And even having my PhD in neuroscience, yes, I know tryptophan's a precursor for serotonin, and I know it comes from our food, but I never really applied it to my own life, right? It's like I was just really following the Western medicine. Oh, if I'm feeling anxiety, depression, I'll just start taking Zoloft, right? And go to a therapist. But I never really thought about, well, if I change what I'm eating and what I'm putting in and on my body, that can actually help mitigate a lot of those effects as well. So I started discovering it for myself, and then it started healing my son and the rest of my family. And then other people started noticing a change in us and wanted to know what we were doing. And I said, why am I keeping this all to myself? Why not share it with everybody? I'm already a professor. I love teaching and educating. So that's why I created Be Well with Dr. Hayley Nelson, to be able to combine all those passions, to be able to share it with more people. So it's funny, it's complete opposite. Mine was a 30-some-year journey to get to the point where I wanted to start being healthy, whereas Tina was born healthy.
Yeah.
So if there aren't any other questions, I don't want to keep you guys on, but if there is anything, please feel free to share.
Hey, I got a question.
Sure.
This is Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Your dad.
Hey, Dad.
Can you talk a little more about probiotics? I'm real curious about that, not only for your gut, but what relationship it has to stress relief. I don't know about probiotics. It's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, a lot of people always think of probiotics as being beneficial to get things moving in the right direction, right? So if if you have constipation or diarrhea, probiotics, they're great for those things as well. But there's so many different strains of bacteria. There's actually more bacteria in our body than there are neurons, believe it or not. So it's something that's just part of our gut flora. We need good bacteria to be able to combat and fight the bad bacteria. So if you don't have some of these good bacteria, you're going to have an overgrowth of these bad bacteria that can cause inflammation, which in turn can lead to, the depletion of serotonin. It can lead to the depletion of other neurotransmitters, just simply by the way that the body works. When it's inflamed, it's going to start sending these immune signals and immune response that eventually it's going to get overworked and shut down. So you're going to be sicker more. People have flare-ups of autoimmune disorders, like even just arthritis, multiple sclerosis. There's so many different, things that people don't even realize are connected to our gut. You can think of your gut as your second brain. Most of your serotonin is actually created in your gut. And so keeping that proper balance, I actually like to relate, bacteria in our gut to New York City. So in New York City, we have all these people, right? We've got lawyers and doctors and Arbonne consultants and personal coaches, and we have retirees and we have students and we have all of these different types of people, right? So you can think of all those different types of people as bacteria. Now, we need all of those people to be able to have a well-balanced society, right? But if you only have lawyers, right? Now, all of a sudden, you have a city that's just full of lawyers. No offense to lawyers out there, right? I love lawyers. Lawyers are great, but I don't want to have a world only of lawyers, right? We need to have this happy balance. And that's what can happen in our gut. If we don't have this wide range of bacteria that we can get naturally from foods, as well as through supplementation, that's where you're going to have that nice balance to be able to combat a lot of the negative effects of stress, but improve your mental health as well as your physical health. Just simply by taking just one additional supplement or incorporating in naturally with the foods that you eat.
Why isn't there enough probiotic in our natural diet?
Because we live on the standard American diet. It's abbreviated SAD, which I think is very fitting because it's very sad indeed. The standard American diet is filled with processed foods that just by going through adding all these preservatives and the way that we package goods, we kill most of the bacteria that's naturally found in our diet. Now, if you lived holistically and lived on a farm and you were able to pull your own fruits and vegetables from the ground and grow them yourself, and you're able to, kill your own animals if you choose to eat meat, and eat them fresh, then you would actually probably have enough good bacteria naturally, especially like fermented foods and yogurts and things like that have a lot of wonderful bacteria in them, but most of us don't eat that way. So that's why there's a big market out there for people who, okay, I'm going to eat the best I can living in America, right? But I need that added supplement. And there are some really good products out there, but buyer beware, there are some pretty bad ones out there. And I don't want to say they're bad. They're just not that effective and you're just going to be wasting your money.
Okay. Good answer. Okay, I got it. It's going to make me want to drink more beer because I ferment my beer, right?
Yes, the yeast is a bacteria, but that's one of those bacteria that is good for some things, but it can cause bloating and some of these other things. So that's where that would be like living in a city just of lawyers, right? So you need to have other things other than just be your dad. Thanks for the question, though. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all so much again. I really appreciate it. And feel free to reach out to either of us or both of us. We thank you. And
yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we will record this, or it is recorded. So if you would like to see a copy of it or any of the documents that we shared, we're happy to email them to you as well. So just reach out to us and hopefully we'll see you around.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.